All right, welcome back, everybody. We are here for the semifinals of the Collector's Cash midseason showdown in Kansas City. I am joined here with Mr. Matt Jackson. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Looking at
Uh-oh, Matt. Looking at Matt might have died. Matt, are you dead?
I hope I'm not dead.
Oh, sorry. Sounded like you cut out there just for a second. Try that one more time.
My bad. Okay, looking at the stream, it looks like we're gonna see an interesting team from Josh, I believe, is on our bottom screen with the Toros. So this will be a very cool set. We already saw Sean on stream. Sean's running that Ducks Garchomp, Arcanine, Tapu Lele, and Metagross. And Josh's team is pretty interesting on its own.
Yeah, we've seen some pretty interesting adaptations from Sean. Game by game, it seems like he's really been aware of what his opponent is capable of and making adjustments accordingly. And so since we haven't seen Josh, he has a reputation of bringing a few odd things here and there. One thing that we should be aware of is that Tauros has a couple interesting abilities in the VGC format. Because if you've got a move like, let's say, Frost Breath, which is usually put on something like Smeargle, which is there to disrupt and annoy, which we don't see on Josh's team, Tauros can be using Anger Point, which I don't recall if Ninetales gets Frost Breath or not, but that could be something interesting. Tauros also can run Intimidate. It gets access to Earthquakes and Rock Slides, so it can be all around just kind of annoying.
Yeah, Tauros is a very... If it's Intimidate or if it's the Anger Point, we're just going to have to see. I wonder if we'll be able to see it if he brings it to these matchup. One thing we should note is that there are two different weather setters on the field with the Ninetales and Pelipper, so gaining control of that weather is going to be key in this matchup.
And it looks like we had a brief whiteout on our end. Hopefully that didn't affect you guys. But now we're getting into the game. It looks like Josh Adams is going to go ahead and lead that Celesteela Snorlax, a super bulky lead. And then Sean's going to lead his tried and true Double Ducks.
Yeah, very giant contrast in leads. We have from Sean's side of the field going with the very, very bulky team on Josh's side with the Snorlax and Celesteela.
Yeah, so we've kind of got this hyper offense style that's been popularized at almost every single international this year. With Golduck and Pelipper, we've got the Tailwind support. We've seen Scald and the Hydro Vortex capable from Golduck, and then Pelipper has a lot of options with like Brines and Hurricanes. But then Josh has super bulky Pokemon. Celesteela is no slouch when it comes to that special defensive side. And now we've got Ninetales coming out here to completely disrupt any weather boost that we're going to see on the Double Duck side.
And that was a great switch, as we do see the Golduck Hydro there.
Yeah, and so that could have been going straight into Celesteela and now into Ninetales, which would basically negate Ninetales' ability to do too much here, especially if he doubled into that slot. But we do see the Snorlax, so not quite the weakest Pokemon on the field, but that is a surprising amount of damage that is almost entirely healed back by that Pinch Berry.
But it is very important that the Snorlax actually setting up the Belly Drum here, which is a very risky play considering how low the HP is on it. We're gonna have to see what Josh does the next turn.
Yeah, he's got that Belly Drum and he's taking hail damage. So there needs to be some way for him to protect this Snorlax. Otherwise, that Belly Drum was an entirely wasted move for him. So if he can get the Aurora Veil up, he might be able to survive a couple more shots and recycle up. But Pelipper may or may not need to go for the Tailwind here, so Sean has the opportunity to just double into this Snorlax slot.
We're just going to have to see. We do see the Aurora Veil from Josh's side. Potentially make that Snorlax a little bit bulkier. Golduck goes for the Skull. Let's see if it's going to be enough for the knockout. Snorlax hanging on, but Pelipper, it looks like, doubled up into it. Very smart play by Sean to remove the big threat on the field.
Yeah, unfortunate. Snorlax does have a lot of special defensive bulk. But unfortunately, even with the Aurora Veil, he was at such low health due to the Hydro Vortex and the other attack from Pelipper, plus the Belly Drum and the hail damage. Snorlax just wasn't able to hold on. So now at this point, we've got Josh that we know has the Celesteela in the back, but at this point, he's a little bit on the back foot.
We do see the Celesteela in. The Celesteela, I guess it's in a pretty safe spot. If I'm Sean, I might want to switch out Pelipper here, get the weather back in your favor. Golduck is not really threatened a lot either, though, so we could probably just fire off an attack.
Yeah, and especially since we don't have any misty terrain up at the moment, like we've seen so commonly throughout the day, everybody's Scald is going to be able to put on Burn, which luckily for Josh, there have been no burns. But, I mean, these are threats that we have to weigh and keep into consideration. We do have the Aurora Veil up, and Josh can preserve his Ninetales for later on, but he's going to opt for Icy Wind for a little bit of speed control. Looks like he's trying to slow things down just in case there's a Tailwind coming up.
I really like that play from Josh because if Ninetales necessarily wasn't going to do a lot of damage if it Blizzard or something, as we do actually see the burn come on out here, it covered a lot of options, like negating the speed control aspect as much from the duck side of the field, and also being able to potentially cover a switch if Sean would have went for it.
Yeah, and that Aurora Veil definitely helping Ninetales stick around. The burn is a little bit unfortunate, but thankfully not crippling for something like Ninetales, which is generally a special attacker. And, you know, the nice thing about Josh is that he didn't lose quite as much of a step with that Tailwind because of that Icy Wind. But Celesteela behind an Aurora Veil with Leech Seed set up, I mean, this is... this might be a long game for us.
Absolutely. If it all depends a lot on whether or not Sean brought that Arcanine in the back to pressure on the Celesteela.
So what is kind of interesting to keep in mind at a point like this, like we're pretty early into this, but now that we've seen a Celesteela out here behind an Aurora Veil, a disable? Skull being disabled, that's pretty big. So that means that heavy slams from Celesteela, if it is a physical Celesteela, those are going to continue to be full power because he's not going to be able to get the burn. So that's a great disable from that Ninetales. A nice little bit of tech coming out.
Oh, absolutely. And if he wants, we saw the Ninetales as well, because Celesteela is definitely not threatened here.
Mm-hmm. And what I was trying to say beforehand is that we do want to keep in mind that there is an overall round timer. And so that's just something to set in here, that if Josh is going to continue to play very slow and methodically, these are things that both players want to keep in mind in the long run. Again, not an issue here because we're only in the first game, but something to keep in mind for later. So at this point, we've got a 4-3 lead coming on Sean's side. But, you know, Celesteela being so bulky, and Sean, one thing that has been surprising me about Sean is that even if he doesn't have weather control, he's still maintaining Pelipper on the field. How do you feel about that? That feels a little risky to me.
Well, I think Pelipper's, it would be very smart to switch it out, but he knows that the Ninetales does have Icy Wind. Maybe he's just waiting for one of them to potentially die, but he's not doing anything to the Celesteela, which is kind of, it's not helping him out a whole lot. Because after a while, once Tailwind expires, this Celesteela might even outspeed like the Golduck.
We do see a really unfortunate burn for Josh, but a great play for Sean, knowing that he's got Scald disabled on Golduck, but he's going to be able to get the Scald off with Pelipper. And then dealing a little bit of damage to Ninetales with that Ice Beam. Looks like it took it down just enough that Burne's going to be able to take it out, which means that Sean will be able to switch Pelipper back out later and possibly maintain weather control for the rest of the game.
That Burn actually coming in clutch with the extra chip damage throughout the turns.
Yeah, Ninetales immune to the hail recoil at the end of every turn, but adding that extra chip from Burn basically means that everybody's taking damage.
We'll have to see what Josh switches in here. It is going to be the Garchomp.
Yeah, so at this point, this explains why Josh wanted to make sure that he was constantly controlling speed. He wanted to make sure that he had the Icy Winds, so he wasn't switching out Ninetales to maintain the weather control in the late game. He wanted to make sure that Golduck was slow enough that basically this forces Sean into losing Ice Beam on Golduck, which is a great answer to Garchomp, or pulling a double switch, which puts him in a pretty bad position offensively.
Yeah, especially, I believe Tailwind expired last. Oh no, Tailwind has one turn left, my bad. The Garchomp, there are 2 Icy Wind stages that were knocked down, so this Garchomp could potentially just outspeed and KO with something like, I guess he goes for the Earthquake here. That's a pretty safe play. Like the Garchomp was able to outspeed those Icy Winds coming in clutch here, as he should be able to just even the count here.
Yeah, and Pelipper is able to outspeed Celesteela, and going for a Scald here, trying to get that really clutch burn, which unfortunately for Sean, he doesn't get. But that Heavy Slam should be able to take out Pelipper. And now that we've got Tailwind ending at the end of this turn, both Pokemon that were Icy Winded are off the field. So basically we've got a straight up speed tier matchup. But with Garchomp here going for Earthquake, I mean, we saw that Sean in the back has potential for a Metagross, has potential for that Arcanine. So just making sure that if something was going to switch out or switch in for Sean, that, I mean, that's a great call. It was going to do at least neutral. And now seeing that Metagross and Arcanine, that would have been super effective damage. He kind of bottlenecked in Sean, making sure that he went for that Earthquake.
That was a very smart play. But Celesteela was going to pick up the knockout anyway.
Yeah, so it was a great option by Josh, covering almost every option that Sean had. And now that we've got Arcanine, we've intimidated and burned the Celesteela, and we've got a Garchomp here at -1, continuing to go for the Earthquake, which is going to be super effective. And Metagross outside of terrain, which is something that Sean may or may not have wanted. But that Arcanine taking a good chunk of damage and then going for Flare Blitz on Celesteela.
Is that enough to potentially activate the berry? And it is very... We'll have to see what this Metagross goes for. If it potentially knocks out the... If it knocks out the Garchomp here, that would be huge.
Yeah, or even just getting a Meteor Mash boost would have been really nice. We've seen in previous games that he hasn't opted for going for Bullet Punch, so we don't know if that Metagross has it. But it is a potential. But a really nice, safe play from Josh. Having fairly decent confidence that Celesteela is going to stay on the field. Just going for the Leech Seed to kind of slow things down, keep things on his speed. But now, we've got Garchomp, which outspeeds the Arcanine. It may have extreme speed, but unless we've got an extreme speed Bullet Punch, this Garchomp's going to be able to do a huge amount of damage.
Yeah, the Garchomp might be able to hang on. You need to try. Josh really needs to get rid of the Arcanine.
Yeah, that Arcanine damage is pretty big. He is going to go ahead and protect Celesteela, try and regain some HP, maybe trying to bait out... Ooh, that was pretty close. Maybe trying to bait out a Protect on the Arcanine or the Metagross, or trying to prevent anything else from going into that Celesteela so that it's got the opportunity to 1v1 a potential Metagross face-up. But hey, the Arcanine going down to the Earthquake because of that Rough Skin recoil. And now Meteor Mash from Metagross. That Rough Skin should pick up the KO there.
Yeah, just beautifully played by Josh. In his favor so that he could just sweep with Garchomp. What do you think that Sean needs to do to readjust for Game 2?
Yeah, so one thing that I would have really enjoyed to see, and this goes for both players, kind of prioritizing a little bit of weather control. Sean, as we've seen repeatedly throughout the day, is willing to leave Pelipper out, even if he doesn't have speed control maintained, and even if he doesn't have the weather maintained. But seeing Josh controlling the weather throughout the entire game, incrementally just getting chip on everything on Sean's side, that was pretty devastating. And we could see that by the end, Golduck and Pelipper at -2 speed, even under Tailwind, no switching to reset those drops. It just ended up putting Sean in a pretty bad position. So maintaining weather, maintaining speed control, I think that Sean might be able to pull this back in his favor.
Yeah, like there was a couple of turns where it was just Ninetales. If you're Sean, you could have just switched in that Arcanine or even that Metagross there and have gotten a potential threat and the KO on both of them, but he just opted to not go for it. So I think you're exactly right. Maybe getting that weather control in his favor would be important.
And on Josh's side, there were definitely a couple times where he was a little off. With the Snorlax, for example, if he protects the Snorlax a little better, then he's going to be able to do a lot more damage with that Snorlax, other than the 0 damage, other than to itself.
You're 100% correct. And now we see completely different leads by both sides. We see the Koko Garchomp from Josh against the Lele Metagross from Sean.
Yeah, and we've seen this look from Sean, I think once before, where we've got the Zen Headbutt boosted by the Psychic Terrain, and then the same type attack bonus on Psychic from Tapu Lele. And I mean, this is a huge offensive threat from Sean, but still, we've got a Garchomp out here that's capable of dealing a lot of damage, and a Tapu Koko that's very fast.
If the Garchomp has something like the Tectonic Rage, he could threaten Lele and Metagross here. So Sean is going to have to be careful.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be rough, because it seems like Josh has the threats, I mean, all over the place. So we've got Garchomp going ahead and switching out. Looks like he probably doesn't want to try and take a Moonblast from this Tapu Lele. And then Sean's going to switch out that Metagross, not wanting to take an Earthquake. These are pretty smart plays.
Oh, very smart by both players. That Garchomp maybe not wanting to take that Moonblast or Zen Headbutt. So we just see that switch out, and then the Arcanine getting the Intimidate on that Garchomp. Now, we just see a lot of Pokemon just moving in and out this turn.
In and out, in and out. And everybody's trying to maintain some board positioning. We talked a lot today about maintaining an information advantage on your opponent. And what we're seeing right now is definitely great board positioning by these players. We see that the Celesteela switches into that Garchomp slot, potentially expecting that there's a Moonblast going there. Our Steel Celesteela is going to resist that Moonblast really well. And then we've got some Ninetales weather control here, just in case there was a switch into other weather. But now we've got some extra bulk that could come into the Celesteela if that Aurora Veil comes back out again.
You're absolutely correct. And nice switch by... Get the Aurora Veil set up in his favor. Josh's team has very remarkable switching synergy, just covering each other's weaknesses, with the Celesteela and Garchomp especially.
So one thing that we haven't seen yet is that fourth Pokemon in the back for Sean. He may have opted to not bring Rain at all, but at this point, I mean, we see the Aurora Veil, so it could have been a really nice option for him, even if he didn't want to bring Double Ducks. just maintaining that weather control with Pelipper that would have stopped the Aurora Veil in its tracks. But you know what's interesting? There was no Focus Sash on that Ninetales, just the Aurora Veil. So that could imply that maybe he's got some Light Clay on there, which extends the amount of turns that Aurora Veil lasts.
Oh, absolutely. Unfortunately, on to the Ninetales, because most of them do live that Flare Blitz. So that is a little bit unfortunate, but we do see this.
What a great KO. That nice
attack boost.
Oh man, attack boost is something that we haven't seen on Celesteela for quite a long time. That was a very early meta boost that we would see on Celesteelas. Because the Heavy Slam has such a high base power against almost everything. Celesteela is one of the heaviest Pokemon in the game, and very few Pokemon take anything less than maximum damage from it. All right, so we do
Koko. We see the the Koko come in for Josh and the Garchomp come. So a decent switch in for Sean here, as he'll be able to threaten the Koko a little bit, and the Arcanine threatening the Celesteela.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we saw the Berry proc on Sean's Arcanine just now, which is why it's back up to full health. So a Volt switch like we saw earlier into that Arcanine would have been able to potentially pick up the KO, keeping the Celesteela pretty safe. But it looks like Josh reads that really well, knowing that the Arcanine doesn't want to stick around, and gets a beautiful Dazzling Gleam off on that Garchomp.
And then here we actually find out that Sean's Garchomp is the Tectonic Rage, most likely going for that Tapu Koko here to pick up the clean KO. So, trading off the damage here, you have to worry about the Garchomp in the back, though, because it looks like that Garchomp might be in Earthquake range.
Yeah, and now that we've seen that Celesteela is not only a fairly bulky, stall-based Pokemon, we also still have the Aurora Veil up, which means that it's going to be protected at least a little bit from the Flare Blitzes from Arcanine. Everything is still taking chip damage from Hail, but Celesteela trying to recover things with Leech Seeds. So, I mean, right now, Celesteela endgame might be Josh's play.
Josh just pivoted himself really well. He kind of has the Arcanine pinned. The Arcanine, I don't believe, can take a neutral Earth. So we're going to have to see how Sean can pivot himself to make this matchup more.
And Sean leaving Arcanine in the back, switching that out a little earlier, it did preserve the Intimidate. I don't think that that's going to help out his Garchomp too much, but it might make it so that his Metagross is able to try and do a little bit of damage. We haven't seen a whole lot out of this Celesteela, so we don't know if there's a Flamethrower or a Fire Blast, or if it's just opting for a lot of stall.
Absolutely, and we saw how much damage that Meteor Mash did. That'll be very important. The Arcanine can hang on, but that looks like the Hail might be...
Oh, and a solid miss. That's so unfortunate for Sean. We mentioned earlier in this stream that Metagross can sometimes be a little bit blinded by the X on its face, just covering its eyes. So we've seen Metagross throughout the year miss crucial attacks, and I think that was absolutely one of them.
If he could have gotten a potential KO onto the Garchomp there, he could have potentially clawed his way back with the Metagross and Garchomp. It looks like unless Sean had some sort of like Fire Fang, looks like the matchup would still have been in Josh's favor, but just the miss is always just extra salt in the
Yeah, and again, because Sean doesn't have control of the weather, we're seeing how much chip damage is going through onto Metagross, which has taken 3 or 4 turns of Hail. Garchomp has taken a couple turns of Hail. Hail took out that Arcanine. it's really unfortunate that Sean didn't prioritize keeping control of the weather in this matchup.
Yeah, if he would have potentially, that Aurora Veil, it just helped the Celesteela throughout the entire game. We do see the Fire Fang, but I mean, even with the Aurora Veil, that only did a very small number percent.
Yeah, and that heavy slam here, gonna go ahead and take out that Garchomp. And that's Josh Adams winning this set pretty clean 2-0.
And he is our first finalist in the Collector's Cat.
All right.
I definitely believe that Sean definitely needed to conserve the weather there. Aurora Veil just proved to be too much. The Celesteela as well was proved to be just a gigantic effort, as the only way that he could solidly hit it would either have been with the Arcanine or with the Hydro Vortex from the Golduck.
Yeah, and we've seen a couple people play double ducks where they'll have some of the weather in the back or leave Golduck in the back. And that might have been an idea for him, maybe at a future tournament. So it looks like we're going to wrap up for a little bit, take a small break while we set up the next game.
We'll see you guys soon.